And the next topic for debate is the important issue of the options for the new Lower Thames Crossing. It's a pleasure to call Jackie Doyle-Price.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter, and thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. I should also say it's very good also to see my honourable friend, the Minister, in his place. I've debated these issues a number of times with a number of ministers over the last 3.5 years, but this is the first time I've had the pleasure to debate with him, and it's good to see him in his place. I'm also grateful for the interest shown by my honourable friends. It shows the importance of this issue. The government is currently considering where to site a new river crossing in the Lower Thames area. And as we all know, new Thames crossings don't come along very often, and it perhaps makes the debate all the more challenging when they do. But I think it's really important that we get the location right, and I think that's why we need to really have a discussion in this place today. Now, there are some people who think that the removal of the toll barriers, which is due to take place next year, will actually alleviate the need for a new crossing, given that it will increase the capacity at the existing Dartford crossing. But I think that's wrong. I think to rely too much on that as a solution is excessively short-termist. We do need good infrastructure if we're going to make the most of economic growth opportunities. And I really feel that we've had insufficient crossings to the east of Tower Bridge, and I'd really like to see 2 more new crossings in London and a new crossing in the Lower Thames area, but obviously one that is much further downstream than the options before us today. Now, the government's consulted on 3 options, of which one has been ruled out, but we are still looking at 2. And I think people are really looking for clarity, but perhaps the fact that we've still not reached a decision just illustrates how difficult it is. And really that's my request to the Minister. Given that there is no obvious solution to this problem, I think it is time to look again and perhaps look at other options. Yes, indeed.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate her on securing this important debate. And I pay tribute to the work that she's put in trying to alleviate the congestion that affects both her constituency and my constituency. And to that end, would she recognise with me the difficulties that there would exist if we were to put an extra crossing at so-called option A next to the existing Dartford crossing, that in fact would not create an alternative for the motorist. It would give the motorist no choice. And so therefore, if there was any problem on the M25 at that location, the problems that we see today would only be worse.
Doyle-Price.
My honourable friend preempts much of what I was about to say, and I completely agree with him. And I think this is really the mistake with the options that we currently have before us. To be honest, they are just lines on a map. They are sticking plaster. They've been informed by cost more than what's actually in the best interest of developing sustainable road infrastructure and ones that will actually meet the needs of our growing economy. And you know, we all have great ambitions for the Thames Gateway as a powerhouse of economic regeneration, but they won't be realised unless we have adequate road infrastructure in place. And really that means developing a new Lower Thames crossing much further east so that we're opening up the whole of South Essex and North Kent to those opportunities. Now, as my honourable friend will be aware, the 2 options still currently under consideration both go through my constituency. But I have to say to him, my objections are not based on NIMBYism. My reasons for opposing the 2 current options relate entirely to the resilience of the road network, and by that I mean both local and the strategic road network. On the local issues, as Thurrock is a major logistics hub with substantial port infrastructure, a functioning road infrastructure is crucial to our continued economic success, and I should advise him that the problems caused by traffic congestion are without doubt the biggest issue in my postbag, not just from residents but business too, and they tell me that it really is costing them jobs and business. And I'm concerned that while the Highways Agency will advise the department about impacts on the national road network, hitherto insufficient consideration has been given to the impact of either options on the local road network, and I'm sure that my honourable friend, the member of Dartford, would agree with that point. And the reality is that the impact of either option A or C, the 2 that we are left considering, would have a critical impact on Thurrock's local network. But if
Will my honourable friend give way?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. And can I also congratulate my honourable friend for securing this very important debate. She's talking about the resilience of the road network and the economic potential that South Essex has. Of the two remaining options on the table, option A and option C, does she agree with me that option C, as well as not addressing and not helping to deliver the full economic potential of South Essex, it would also have an incredible environmental impact and divide what is a rural established community in two, thus wrecking the rural part, one of the most significant rural parts left in South Essex?
Jackie Doyle-Price.
My honourable friend is entirely right to identify the environmental impacts of option C particularly, which is perhaps the biggest barrier to that option. But I'd also point out to him that in addition to that, option A has significant air quality impacts. And taken together, both those issues, the fact that we are talking about serious environmental damage, again illustrate that we are looking at the wrong options. But if I could just say a little bit more about option A, which as my honourable friend has said, is at the site of the Dartford crossing. Now, I understand the Highways Agency's reasons for recommending this as an option. I've been down to the control room. Sorry.
The order of the sitting will continue and will continue until 4:41. 16:41. Jackie Doyle-Price.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. I will resume my critique of option A, which I was just saying was the Highways Agency's preferred option because of the challenges currently of managing the traffic flow into the tunnels. However, as it is, Thurrock routinely experiences gridlock whenever there's an incident at the Dartford crossing, and that would only get worse if option A was the choice which went forward. And I'll just give an example. Over the Christmas period, as a result of the high winds, the bridge was closed on 3 occasions. And for those of my constituents who live inside the M25, and that includes myself, we are totally cut off when incidents like this take place. The traffic conditions are utterly miserable. And I advised the Minister that on the 23rd of December, it took me 105 minutes to travel 2 miles between Lakeside Shopping Centre and my house. So I say the Dartford crossing may be part of our strategic road infrastructure, but when things go wrong, its impact is very much on the local road network in Thurrock. And I should add, it did add insult to injury for those local users who were actually crossing the tunnels, that the tolls continued to be levied during this disruption. After many commitments that at times of serious congestion, they would be lifted. The Minister will also recall the security incident which took place last September, when both the bridge and the tunnels at the Dartford crossing were closed. And the disruption that caused really did illustrate very clearly just how much dependency the road network has on that one crossing. So I think that makes the argument very much that any new crossing shouldn't be at that location, but should be a new one. And in my view, the interest of the strategic road network would be best served if we start to look at creating a new outer ring road to complement the M25. And that really brings me to what is wrong with option C, because option C, of course, will link up on the north side, not the south, but on the north side with the M25 and the A13, and that's already severely congested. One other issue about option A, which I think the Minister should also reflect on, which is representations I had from Vopak, which has a fuel terminal sited just to the east of the Dartford crossing. And they've advised me that if option A were to be built, then that may require the closure of Vopak's West Thurrock terminal. As things stand, that would have very serious implications for the resilience of the fuel supply to London and the South East. So I think that's my final nail in the coffin for option A, hopefully. Now, as regards option C, I'm aware that that option has generated considerable support from the left, not least because it's supported by Essex and Kent county councils. And to be fair to Kent, they've developed their vision of how the road network should look on the south side. Unfortunately, that thinking hasn't really taken place on the north side. And as I say, that means the result is that that would add more burdens to the M25 and the A13. So for me, option C is not the answer. And I would just remind the Minister that at the time of the 2009 study, there were 2 further options, option D and option E, which I believe would lead to the possible creation of a new proper orbital road, which would significantly add to our road transport infrastructure. Now, it appears to me that those options have been ruled out on the basis of cost. And dare I say to the Minister, I believe very clearly that this is a false economy. Sooner or later, we will have to build a new outer ring road, particularly, as I say, if we are to realise the economic potential of the Thames Gateway. And I think it will also be worth bearing in mind the additional connectivity of the eastern region that a new outer ring would create. It would add to the connectivity of Stansted Airport, which would also help deal with our aviation capacity challenges. And in particular, option D, a crossing at Canby, would allow connectivity with the A130, a very underutilised road. Now, I'm very much aware that what I'm suggesting will have the effect of slowing down the timetable for the new crossing, but I think it's really important that we do get the right solution and we don't just do sticking plaster. Indeed, yes.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. My honourable friend is making some very powerful points, particularly around option C. To maximise the potential for future growth in South Essex, if we were to look again at options D and E, does she agree with me that that would also allow us to make the most of Southend Airport, which is now a growing hub and is making great strides at providing additional airport capacity? And yet we still have to come, if you want to get to Southend in any meaningful way, you have to come all the way to the M25 and then out along the A13. An outer ring road might start to address that particular issue.
Actually, my honourable friend makes an excellent point and again illustrates the importance of looking at transport issues, not just in terms of rail, not just in terms of roads and not just in terms of airports, but to look at the whole picture. And you know, for those people just down the river at City Hall who talk about a Thames Estuary airport, let's just remind ourselves we already have one at Southend. And it's one which is actually very popular with my constituents because it's almost as nice an experience as London City Airport, if you've ever used it, Mr. Streeter. I can recommend, if you ever do a short haul, use Southend. But my honourable friend is entirely right. And I think that's what really disappoints me about this entire debate. I have to say, I congratulate Kent County Council for the work they've done on this. You know, they have taken the 2009 study, used it as a prompt to really develop their vision for what they need for their road network. And it's very disappointing that that thinking hasn't taken place on the north side of the riverbank. And I think Essex County Council and Thurrock Borough Council really should hang their heads in shame, because we are now on the back foot, because we're now responding to these proposals. In 2009, the highways engineers of those two authorities should have sat down and come up with a sensible solution. We've seen evidence actually that Southend are starting to do that, and they're recognising, as my honourable friend has pointed out, the opportunities that it will give them with their growth strategy based around the airport. And it really does show that when communities can be very badly let down by poor leadership of their local authorities, we are now having to respond to decisions being made without us being at the table. And that's regrettable. However, never say die. Both my honourable friend and I are loud at being champions for our communities. So we will try and shift the agenda ourselves, but it's rather difficult because we are on the back foot. But if I could just make a real pitch to the Minister, please look again at option D across it Canby. Look at how that would connect with the A130. Really look at the impact that these options would have on the M25 and the A13. I just point out that the A13 is only dual carriageway after Tilbury Docks, again showing the weakness of Essex and Thurrock in responding to the road traffic infrastructure challenges that they really should have done if we were to maximise our economic competitiveness. As I say, I know what I'm suggesting will slow things down, but what I implore the Minister to do is bring the long-term vision and thinking that the Department is showing about aviation and is showing particularly about rail and the development of HS2, because this is an investment which will bring more bang for its buck. Now, on a final note, I'd just like to thank the Minister and the Department for responding positively to the requests we had locally for investment in Junction 30, which will go a long way to addressing many of the issues of the M25. I thank him also for the concessions that he's given the residents of Dartford and Thurrock for use of the Dartford crossing, which have gone down so very well and been very welcome. The Department's always engaged very openly in the representations we've made, and I hope he'll reflect on these representations in the same vein. And I'd just like to put one little last thought into his head. The options we have before us are based on bridges and tunnels, and if we are going to take a more long-term view of these things, there may need to be an interim solution. I'd just point out that the Woolwich ferry carries 1 million vehicles a year, and maybe we should look at the potential for ferries to boost crossing capacity on the Thames.